Oh, hey, Dragon Quest X. Okay. Are you going to localize it in the West finally? Is that what we're getting here? Don't get my hopes up, Square Enix. Don't do it. Okay, let's see. Say it. Say it. Coming West. Coming West. I'm feeling it. Okay, say it's coming West. Come on. Come on. Oh, son of a bitch! Dragon Quest is my favorite RPG series ever. Not just Japanese RPGs, not just console RPGs, all role-playing games, period. Like most diehard Dragon Quest fans, I've played every game in the number series, except for 10. For those who don't know, Dragon Quest X is a massively multiplayer online RPG that released 10 years ago in Japan, but was never localized in other regions. At this point, I think it's time to accept that that game will never be localized in English. Maybe the recently announced offline version will come West one day, but for now, the only option Western fans have to play Dragon Quest X is to try and play it in Japanese. Luckily, as I recently learned, the entire base game and the first part of the version 2 expansion are fully playable for free up to level 80 without needing a Japanese Square Enix account, and it's pretty easy for Western players to jump in. So, I logged out of the 19-year-old Final Fantasy MMO I've been playing lately to check out the 10-year-old Japan-exclusive Dragon Quest MMO instead. I played for several hours on a couple different platforms to answer whether Dragon Quest X is playable for people who can't speak Japanese, and I can confidently say the answer is yes. There's a lot I need to unpack to give you a complete answer, so I'll cover everything from setting up the game, finding guides, and the actual gameplay and story experiences based on the few hours I've played so far. This is not a review, since I haven't played enough to feel comfortable giving a full review, but I'll be going over my impressions of what I've played so far, and if that sounds good to you, we'll go over how you can get started as well. First, let's talk about how you actually play this game. Dragon Quest X is available on several consoles, but the easiest for Western players to play on are the PC, Switch, and PS4 versions. I tried out the PC and Switch versions specifically. Both versions are viable options, but each one has its own pros and cons. Personally, I found the Windows version to be a little more difficult to set up, but there is a recently released third-party tool called DQX Clarity that partially translates some of the in-game menus. And there's another one called Akon that auto-translates the story dialogue, albeit pretty roughly. These tools aren't perfect, they've only been recently released, and they're only available on Windows, but they do make the PC version much easier to play once you're set up. The Switch version, however, is much easier to download and set up in my experience. While you lose out on the integrated third-party translation tools, I just use Google Translate on my phone, and it works just fine. So far, I prefer the Switch version because I enjoy playing games on the Switch, and I find the setup and sign-in process to be so much simpler than the PC, but I will admit that the PC version will probably be the best way for English players to play, especially once those translation tools are further along. Best of all, neither version requires you to make a Square Enix account, so you can really just set up your account and play. However, if you do create a Square Enix account, you can eventually transfer your character into the cloud so you can hop between platforms. For now though, both versions are largely playable even without translation apps thanks to the numerous guides out there. I'll cover some of those in a bit, and you'll find links to everything I mentioned down in the description box or if I pin a comment down below. Setting up and logging into Dragon Quest X is one thing, but actually playing the game is another. Now, I've imported and played other Japanese games before, most notably Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate on the Switch, before it was localized in America. But Dragon Quest and Monster Hunter are two very different types of video game, and Dragon Quest story and gameplay will be harder to understand if you can't read Japanese, which I can't, despite studying the language for 4 years in college and high school. So I was skeptical before I started playing. But after I got everything set up, I was surprised to find it plays much more like a single-player Dragon Quest game than it does an online MMO, for better and for worse. Even more surprisingly, I've been able to stumble my way through the game without too much of a hassle. So I will just give you a brief, generalized overview of each of the big, parts of the gameplay and how they feel to play in Japanese even though I can't speak it. First, the basic menu and interface. The translation tools will make these trivial, whether those are the PC tools or even Google Translate. However, if you're not using the translation tools, it's still easy once you memorize what each option is. As for character growth, items, and equipment, it's going to be slow going, but again, if you memorize certain item names, icons, and which stats you need to worry about, then it's pretty easy. Just make sure the numbers go up. Dragon Quest fans will recognize the map markers for shops, inns, churches, etc., and should feel right at home despite the language barrier. Just keep a guide open, and it will go pretty smoothly. Speaking of keeping a guide open, exploration quests and other in-game content. Okay, so map and quest markers show you pretty much exactly where you need to go. And the guides out there, at least the ones that I use, include simple instructions, helpful tips, and even screenshots showing you exactly what you need to do to complete pretty much every major thing in the game. As for the world itself, it's really great. It's fun to explore. It definitely reminds me more of Final Fantasy XI's zones than many modern MMOs. The environments are huge and littered with loot and chests to find too, so if you feel like exploring off the critical path, you totally can. Which is great for me, but it's something to keep in mind if you're used to faster run speeds and the more guided experience of some other MMOs. As you explore, you're gonna run into mobs, so how's the combat? Actually, the combat is pretty easy to learn, and this is the part of the game that I think is the most interesting. It shows how it's a real evolution between Dragon Quest IX and Dragon Quest XI. So Dragon Quest IX introduced this kind of arbitrary movement on screen for your party members during combat. Dragon Quest XI took that a step further and let you actually control your characters if you want during combat encounters. That exists in Dragon Quest X as well. However, it's actually necessary. See, if you move around, you'll avoid enemy attacks. Not only that, but if you run into an enemy, you'll start pushing them, allowing you to push them out of way of weaker party members and even interrupt their attacks. It gives you something to do in combat besides just hitting the commands or worrying about positionals that I find really fun and really interesting. Despite these changes though, it still really feels like a Dragon Quest game. It's all command based, and guides will give you tooltips if you're not sure what different abilities and items do. And if you need to figure it out on the fly, just point your phone at the screen to get rough translations if you're in a rush and forgot what an ability does. Just know it's not going to be a perfect translation. I know that they're talking about switching up the command-based battles for Dragon Quest XII, and I hope that this is more what they're talking about. There's a lot to like here. My only complaint with the combat and just the content in the game so far is that it's been pretty easy. I guess I'm okay with that, but, you know, if you're looking for more of a challenge, it's not here, at least in the early game, and from what I can hear, the rest of the game is that way too. Now, what about the activities outside of combat? Stuff like crafting and fishing and other systems. Frankly, I have no idea. I haven't gotten there yet, and my guess is it'll be slow going to learn this stuff, just like the rest of the game, but if you're dedicated, you'll probably make it work. And, of course, again, guides out there will tell you exactly what to do. I don't know how much of that you're actually going to have to engage with later on in the game, and I know that there's probably a lot of people who like that sort of thing, but so far I've been able to avoid it and I'm fine with that. Finally, let's talk about the actual MMO and group stuff. This is an MMORPG after all. So, similar to the crafting and other systems, I have had zero experience with grouping or multiplayer in Dragon Quest X, at least so far. Dragon Quest X starts off in an offline mode that introduces you to the game's core systems and the early storyline, before transitioning into the online mode. I haven't encountered any content that forces you to group yet. There are AI party members that you can acquire that will help you out, which is pretty nice. That said, I've had a lot of other players send me messages, party invites, or whistle and cheer me on while I'm fighting mobs, but I have no idea how any of that stuff works, and I probably never will. So far, though, I haven't needed to engage with it, so aside from rudely ignoring these nice folks rooting me on while I bash the slime's face in, it's been fine. Overall, I think this game is pretty doable if you can't speak Japanese, at least the gameplay side, and that's just based on my few hours with the game so far. For anyone who's watching who's put in significant time into this game, please feel free to share your experiences down below if you have anything you'd like to add about how this game progresses and how it feels as you enter into the later stages of the content. Okay, so now let's get to the one part of the game that most people are probably wondering about. You're asking, won't you be missing out on the storyline if you can't read Japanese? And the short answer is yes. In the moment, as you're playing, you won't know exactly what's going on. Google Translate and Occam help, but they're inconsistent. So far, though, I've found it to be okay. You can tell clearly who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and the slapstick humor kind of works when it's there. You do miss out on the characterizations that come through the dialogue, but all the cutscenes are fully animated, so you can get a sense of different characters' personalities. It's not perfect, but it's something. Luckily, though, Dragon Quest X has an active and passionate English player community, and there are several content creators out there translating the story into English. I highly recommend you check out Battle Geek plus Press Start to Awesome on YouTube. Their Dragon Quest lore videos and story synopses are highly entertaining, and so far, this has been my primary way of exploring the game's story. Then there's a bunch of Dragon Quest wikis and other options if you prefer reading what happens rather than watching videos. The only thing to note here is that even the best translations can't convey a character's personality or capture the surprise you'd get from experiencing big story beats as they happen and play out in front of you in the game. But for those of us who don't speak Japanese, these plot synopses and let's plays are our only option unless that offline version eventually gets localized, and we should feel lucky that we have so many awesome people making such great content. So, in my experience, playing Dragon Quest X, if you don't speak Japanese, is doable if you put in the time and the effort. It is a good game, and the few hours I've played makes me even more annoyed that we'll probably never get this version of the game in English. That said, despite how fun the game has been so far, I don't think you need to play it. The language barrier slows down the game quite a bit. Using a guide to play is crucial, but by relying on these guides, it can sometimes feel like you're just going through the motions. I like to explore, I like the combat, and I love experiencing this totally new Dragon Quest world, but since the game puts such a heavy emphasis on story, as all Dragon Quests tend to do, I feel like I'm simply creating an arbitrary task for myself to complete before watching the next lore video or reading about a character on a wiki somewhere. Now, to be clear, Dragon Quest X is a great game. I'd like to try and get through at least the base game's main storyline if I can, but I don't know, we'll see. I'm still playing Final Fantasy XI, and other games are sure to come along that will grab my attention. Clearly, though, plenty of other folks are out there that play Dragon Quest X despite the language barrier. But I think this one is purely for the most passionate and most stubborn Dragon Quest fans out there. If that sounds like you and you're ready to dive in, be sure to check the description box down below for a bunch of links to helpful guides and dedicated Dragon Quest X content creators that you should follow. Also, I want to shout out Quick Review's Dragon Quest X review. It's what originally convinced me to play the game despite my many hesitations, and since they played a lot more than I have, their review was able to go into a lot more detail about the game and the gameplay mechanics than I was able to here. Anyway, y'all, thanks as always for the support. You know, there's been a massive boost in follows, comments, and other interactions on my channel following my Final Fantasy XI video, and I'm truly grateful to each and every one of you. I hope you'll stick around. I have plenty of other content on the way. But until then, take care everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.